Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. I'm really excited to be joined by some awesome young new entrepreneurs who are running a startup called the Diversity Org. And they're going to tell us about their approach, what they're doing that I think is really new in the field of career exposure and exploration, particularly for underrepresented youth. And they're also going to give us our reflections on what the field and corporations in particular could do better to create inclusive environments. But to start off, I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So Joshua, Maisha, whoever wants to dive in, can you tell us who you are, where you're from, and who helped you get where you are?
Maisha, would you like to go first?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Maisha Kabir. I am the Vice President of the Diversity Org. And what I do with our organization is I help expand our partnerships with high schools all across the United States. And I also help develop our relationships with different corporations as well as foundations. I'm originally from Bangladesh, but I moved here 5 years ago. I'm in New York City now. And I would say personally for me, Joshua was very instrumental in helping me, develop and really get to this place and in this sector. And he can tell you a little bit more about that with more clarity.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah. So my name is Joshua Pierce. I am the CEO and founder of the Diversity Organization. I am from New Jersey, and who's really helped to develop my professional experiences in this space. It's been various people, actually. There's this concept that we actually teach students called vertical relationships, meaning establishing relationships with people who are more accomplished or in more positions of power than you currently are. So all the way from when I was once in community college, I had people who advised me to get into NYU. And then I had mentors at NYU, people such as John Sexton, who's the former president of NYU. He provided a lot of advisement, and other faculty at NYU. And then in the corporate space, I've had really great advisors. Another person named Neil Jacoby, who actually works at AT&T in public affairs. So, I've really been very conscientious of finding people who can mentor me in the different spaces that I was in. And that's really allowed us to get a lot of great perspective and develop incredible corporate partners.
Love it. It's like you guys rehearsed these answers, even though I didn't tell them what I was asking beforehand. So thank you for sharing sort of your personal bent on that, Joshua. I think it's a really powerful reminder that we often see in our research, which is that sometimes we talk about a mentor, like this singular person who's going to sort of create all of the opportunities for a young person and have all of the answers. But what research has actually shown is that it's really a web of relationships that makes the difference in terms of helping students both get by and get ahead. So I want to come back to that when we talk a little bit about what you're doing with corporations and your new internship model. But first, let's take a step back and hear a little bit more about kind of the core of what the diversity organization does around career exposure and awareness, particularly in under-resourced high schools. So you have this interesting approach that I'd never seen before, which is bringing assemblies to schools, and you're doing it virtually right now, which I want to talk about in a second. But what made you land on sort of this idea of high school assemblies as a place to actually open students' eyes and broaden their horizons to the careers that might be possible for them?
Well, it started about 6 years ago, and the initial goal was, I'm just going to be really transparent. So I had a there was the chairperson of the math department at my community college, and I went to go visit her because at the time I was really bad at math, and I said, hey, I want to get into NYU, but I need to make sure my grades are good enough to get into NYU. So she says to me, I guess she liked how I was communicating to her. She says, hey, would you like to be the president of the Black Student Union? And I'm like, Black Student Union? I'm here about math. I really don't understand how to correlate right now. But I was like, all right, I'm going to come back with you with a definitive response, in 2 days. I'll pray about it. I'll think about it. She's like, all right, go ahead. I respect whatever you got to do. So I come back to her, and then I say, it's great that you want to do something for like a Black Student Union, but I want to do something around diversity, people of all different backgrounds, where we can focus on really being able to create solutions for a lot of different people. long story short, she's like, all right, go ahead, start it. You're the only person in it, but you got to go start it. I was like, I wish I would have known that before, but okay. So I go and I start it, and it really just blows up at that community college. Like over 800 people signed up in like the first semester, and it became really big. So I saw that there was like an appeal at that school. And then I was like, okay, if this works so well at this one school, maybe this is scalable and other schools will like it. And what's the easiest way to get a bunch of students together without having a bunch of marketing is high school assemblies. Their school administrators can literally mandate for them to be able to participate in an event without, having any marketing or any, so we were able to reach 1,500 students immediately without much heavy lifting. So once we did an assembly there, we realized students love how we present just as well at this than at the community college. So over the course of the years, we really started to sharpen what our focus was going to be and what we were actually going to communicate about. But that's really the inception of how it came together. It was very gradual, but very natural and organic in how we were able to design this kind of assembly strategy. But then as far as what we do, it's really just three simple things. Before even communicating about what we do, who we are is probably the most important part of what we do. Who we are is a diverse group of millennials and Gen Z. So it's like Black, white, Asian, Latino, etc. And why that's important is because we work with large corporate partners, so we understand how to present solutions to them and bring value to the corporate arena. But we also are close enough to low-income minority students' ages so that we understand how to connect with them in a very unique way and galvanize them to really see results that a lot of other, nonprofits haven't been able to see as of recent. So that's who we are. But what we do is just three simple things, and then I'll pass to Maisha if she wants to elaborate on any of that. But what we do is, one, we go to low-income high schools all over the country in some of the poorest neighborhoods, and we teach low-income students about how to obtain corporate and high-income careers. And obviously, as you're aware, the reason we do this is because a lot of students, they perpetuate a cycle of economic disparity on themselves because they're not conscious of the plethora of careers that are out there. So that's the first thing we do, is we really excite them and really make them really motivated about the different types of corporate and high income careers that are even out there. The second thing we do is we partner with some of the biggest companies on earth, such as JP Morgan Chase, Warner Media, so that's HBO, CNN, DC Comics. We work with Colgate, Ernst & Young, Blackstone. So literally some of the leading companies in the world. And we have workshops where students are able to meet professionals in these spaces, but also develop professional skills, but also social and psychological skills. So whether it's overcoming imposter syndrome workshops, or whether it's career exposure panel workshops, or whether it's interviewing workshops, different types of workshops that help low-income minority students excel, but also have employees feel like they're making an impact in the communities that they live in. So that's the second thing we do, is engage with big companies to do workshops that help students professionally develop. And then the third and last thing is we help students get internships in some of these large companies as well, so that companies can have diverse and qualified interns. So that's pretty much the three things that we do right now. And to be completely honest, I've been able to do a lot of, the heavy lifting in this, but it's really possible from having a great team. And somebody like Maisha, she really does half the work in the school partnerships, and I focus on the corporate partnerships. And together we really, have been able to build something very, very successful. So Maisha, would you like to elaborate just on the quality of the work that you've been doing as well?
Yes, absolutely. So this, in 2020, as you're all aware, there was so much social unrest in the country happening. So that year in particular for us was pretty challenging, in the sense that, we had to fully shift to a virtual model, but we were able to really grow so much more with that because, again, as Joshua mentioned, our mantra is that we are them. We're closer to the students' age. We come from similar backgrounds, which is why we really understand how students are thinking, what they find engaging in a virtual mode versus what doesn't work, which is a major reason why we were able to, grow so rapidly, even amidst a pandemic. So even though we had to shift to that virtual model, we were kind of able to build it, bring in, different tools and tactics from social media. Like we know where Gen Zers are, and we incorporate that into our programs. And that really helped us expand and grow and have these students still continue to engage with us despite, Zoom fatigue and having all the classes that they're doing through Zoom. But yeah, that's been like a major growth point for us as well, gratefully.
Awesome. Yeah, I think one of the things we're seeing, there's a lot of simplistic conversation in education right now about everything virtual being terrible. But the organizations that we've been in close contact with that had really been thoughtful about engagement prior to the pandemic, it's not that it was a seamless transition online, but the kind of secret sauce to engagement, whether it's that, to your point, you actually are from the same communities as the kids that you're talking to and can identify with them and get them excited, or that you are bringing new partnerships to bear that otherwise would be out of reach. Those things actually can translate online more seamlessly than maybe traditional stand and deliver instruction that has suffered a lot under these circumstances. So I want to come back to the technology side, because Joshua and I have talked in the past about how that might shape your future strategy. But just to double click on this kind of career awareness and exposure piece, in traditional career exposure curriculum, which already sounds like where dreams go to die, when I was growing up, we had posters on the wall, and maybe you understood what your family members did, but maybe it wasn't even a topic of conversation. And that was really where it ended. It was sort of almost taking like photographs of different jobs, but not getting into the kind of nuts and bolts of what having a job looks like, and what different corporate environments actually look and feel like. So I'm curious, just Joshua, you talk about sort of high demand careers that students can be a part of. I'm curious, with your work with companies, what are a few of the ways that you're helping corporations see the real value in Gen Z and millennials? And conversely, how are you helping students think about those different opportunities? Like, can you unpack it under the hood a little bit of like, when you're trying to tell students about all the possibilities out there, how are you framing it in a way that resonates with them?
Great question. So those are two questions. Do you want me
Yeah,
to speak about
go take it. It's a
employees
twofer.
or the? Okay. So as far as when we're working with the large corporations and how they're getting value out of this, I mean, what's really important for them is, I mean, there's business incentive for them. So one, they do want diverse and qualified interns or they want more diversity in their company, because they do feel, the societal pressure of all the social unrest going on. So they do want to actively create solutions to be a part of, all the good things that are happening in the midst of the chaos. So they do want that, for sure. But then also they want to be able to retain their current workforce. And if company A is engaging with the diversity organization and they're helping them get diverse interns and they're doing workshops, engaging the communities they care about, and then company B is not doing that, people from company B who are very cognizant of everything going on in the social environment right now may feel like they want to go and work for company A because they prefer to engage with a company that actually cares about communities that they care about. So companies are really looking at that and they're like, hey, we don't want to lose employees because we're not engaging the communities that our employees care about. So that's really like a simple way of looking at it. But then as far as engaging the students and making it interesting for the students, there's a plethora of ways that we go about this. One way is obviously like, even in our Zoom presentations, like there's music components, there's sound effects, there's visual effects, there's memes, stuff that they can really relate to, and it's designed in a way that is authentic and understanding what they're actually looking at and what's important to them, but also just helping them to understand the significance of how important it is to select the right career for them and how that's going to affect them in the future economically. So as much as we make it fun and engaging and we have all the sound effects and music and all that other stuff, we have to inform them, according to the Federal Census Bureau, this is the difference between wealth in this demographic and the difference between wealth in that demographic, like really making it painfully clear to them that if they don't make the right career moves, that it's really going to affect their wealth and income become in the future. And, for whatever age you are as a young student, that's something that is real to you, is like knowing that your future and what is actually feasible and how much money that you can actually acquire and what's out there, it just becomes more real to you, especially when you hear it from people like Maisha and I, who are not far from their age, but really close to their age and can say that in a language that's authentic to them, and then be representation. Maisha is, currently going to Columbia University, getting her master's in nonprofit management. And I graduated from NYU, and, I've been able to establish all these partnerships with multi-billion-dollar companies. So when they hear it from us, and then we bring them into our world of what we do, it's just more impactful for them, because not only are we sharing with them pertinent information, but we are the change and the representation that they need to be able to feel like it's actually feasible and possible to, become successful in this corporate space. So we make it very attractive for them, especially because, like I said, we're close to their age and background, and we're viewed by them as cool. So all of those intangibles and tangibles really put together like a great pot of positivity and engagement for the student communities that we're looking to serve.
Totally. I mean, this is one of the reasons I wanted to interview you guys, because I think what we're seeing in the field, if you think about the education system on the whole, not necessarily the most cutting edge programs like yours, is the power of near peers. And that idea gets thrown around a lot. And sometimes it's just for like efficiency and staffing, of saying like, let's have a near peer do this instead of a quote unquote sort of adult full-time staff. But what the research tells us is exactly what you're seeing play out in the diversity organization, which is that young people are actually more likely to trust people who are closer in age to them and engage in authentic relationship where you can actually share power. And I think that notion of sharing power and seeing yourself in someone who is, yes, lending you advice, but not sort of so far and distant that there's an asymmetry of power, is it's a underappreciated component of what it means to build students' sort of networks and expand their horizons. So I think you're hitting on something that you're almost like ahead of the research on it, and certainly ahead of how the education system thinks about younger people as sort of less far along in their careers versus actually having a disproportionate advantage in being the messengers and the mentors to students. So I'm just excited about how you've structured it with your team, and I think you're right, you're hitting the nail on the head, that that's one of the things that can drive engagement that we don't always consider in our traditional school system. So I want to pause on technology for a second, not just because we're on Zoom, but because you guys are doing a whole lot on Zoom these days. And Joshua, when you and I first met, we were talking about the notion of the sort of virtual school assembly, which could go terribly wrong or get a lot right and actually be a scale strategy. So I'm curious to hear you guys just sort of reflect on, and Maisha, you hit on sort of some of the tactics you're using and tools, but as you look post-pandemic, do you think some of the work you're doing, particularly around career awareness and exposure, those assemblies and maybe even the workshops you run, do you think some of that can persist online? Are you optimistic about that? And you can be candid, even though obviously I believe that ed tech can be a game changer.
I'd like to get Maisha's perspective on this as well, but for me, how I'm looking at it is we kind of prepare for the future, but we are very cognizant of what's happening right now. So for example, before the pandemic, when we were doing in-person experiences, we really prided ourselves on having the best the best in-person assemblies and events, high energy, very high exciting events. As far as the technology space and Zoom right now, because we are very conscious of social media, like Maisha was alluding to earlier, and how whether it's Instagram lives or live streams or all the different types of web platforms where you can engage with communities live, because we have that perspective on how that's been able to be successful historically, through social media, we've been able to give those types of presentations, if not better, virtually. But when things change, whether it's like a hybrid or whether it's everything is back to complete normalcy, which was what was before, we're just going to be practitioners to what is happening in the time. So if students are tired of Zoom and they don't want to engage in that kind of thing anymore, and they prefer the live experiences, we're going to deliver upon that, because our goal is to get the best results out of the students. So we're not going to force them into something that is antiquated or outdated because that was relevant to a specific time. We're going to be very cognizant of what's going on in that time and continuing to deliver the most optimal experiences within the context of that time. That's my thoughts on it. But Maisha, if you'd like to elaborate.
No, yeah, I feel like that is a great thing that we've had going on, that we've kind of been ahead of our times. Like, we are very cognizant of the fact that, you know, if we were to go back, whenever we do go back in person, we've already mastered that whole environment of how to excel at assemblies when we are in person. But we're also aware of the fact that a lot of companies are choosing to be virtual moving forward, right? So I personally feel like for us, we will always have that option still. And also it just generally allows us to engage, you know, students nationally. Not whenever, even if we're working in one state, we're able to kind of have students be a part of this experience from all across the world, which is not just good for us, but also for the students themselves, because we're constantly speaking about them expanding their networks, whether it's, you know, vertical or horizontal. So it's a lot, it does a lot for them as well to be able to engage with students just all across the US. So I think we would be still, you know, dipping our toes in both the virtual as well as the in-person engagements.
Great, super helpful. And I think everything you're both saying makes sense of like, Joshua, I loved your answer in the sense that it's actually responding to what students are demanding. It's not about a like top-down strategy that the diversity organization creates about delivery models. It's about what are students demanding and how are you flexibly meeting those demands.
Exactly.
Great. So I want to end on another slightly forward-looking question. And as you know, I think about networks and relationships all the time. So I know you guys are, as you explained, you do assemblies, you do workshops, but you're also launching an internship program to actually get young people, primarily college students, into internships in the companies that you partner with. And I'm curious to hear, you know, internships are getting a lot of attention right now because we know that they are a stepping stone to jobs. We know that they're not equally distributed. But I think we sometimes then say the word internship and we don't get under the hood of like, what does that actually mean? And what does a good internship look like? And Joshua, maybe I'll ask you to harken back to this idea of vertical relationships. As you think about the internships the experiences you're trying to create for your students, what do relationships need to look like in those settings, right? So that a student isn't kind of shoved into a corner doing menial labor, but how are you thinking about, from a variety of angles, but maybe if you can speak to relationships, like what does a good internship look like? And do you have an opinion on that yet? Or are you sort of learning as you go?
I mean, I do have an opinion on it, but there is a lot to learn only because there's so much diversity in types of internships, whether you're doing something computer science related, engineering, marketing, whether you're an executive assistant. So there's so much diversity to the actual positions that can be filled. So, you know, there's and then not only the positions that can be filled, but also the different company cultures, right? A Blackstone is significantly different than HBO, which is different than Colgate, right? Biomedical engineering is different than graphic design, which is different than investment banking. So there's so much diversity, not only in the types of positions, but even the different types of companies and the culture that is brought there. But to just really simplify it, what's important in an internship is a student being able to really understand how to maximize establishing relationships within that company while simultaneously being able to do whatever the requested job is most effectively. So, you know, as an intern going into it, you know, we have training programs where we train students on soft and hard skills. So they're going to have the technical skills needed to be able to qualify and do the internship productively, but also soft skills such as like when to speak in an interview and what types of notes to write, etc. But then also the vertical relationships of how to establish relationships with other senior people or managers within the company, because that's arguably one of the most important things in establishing an intern and having a successful internship is being able to develop successful relationships within that company. So yeah, we kind of really touch on all those things to really help the student maximize that opportunity. And then they have our team as like our company as their sounding board where if they're having challenges or they're having issues, they can come back to us and communicate with us, and we can help them through those situations. But then also we're launching another program called the Corporate Doers Program. So basically what it is, it's, you know, as much as the students are loving our events, the employees are loving the events just as much. Like our data has been incredible. It's been like, you know, 100% of employees who participate in our workshops would recommend it to another employee, or 100% of them say that this influences their decision in staying with their company, right? So we have a lot of hardcore data around the success of the events from the corporate side. So a lot of employees from these big corporations, they don't want to just wait for the next event that's sponsored by their company. They want to be more involved. And that's where we're able to help those corporate employees be able to mentor students who are going through these challenges and can speak specifically to their specific industry. You know, so if somebody is a corporate partner from HBO and a student is having, you know, an internship at Cartoon Network, they can give a lot of perspective on how to navigate that entertainment world. And the same thing with like a company like Blackstone, if it's an investment banker, they can give a student perspective on how to navigate that as a young intern, as an investment banker. So, you know, that's a lot of that's kind of just how we're viewing internships. Essentially, to summarize it in one sentence, we want to help them with soft skills. We want to help them with hard skills. We want to help them with understanding how to network, but we also want to be a strong support system so that they can be able to continue and retain and be retained in that internship.
Love it. And I think that last piece of not making it something that's sink or swim, which I think a lot of programs inadvertently kind of fall into, is really the key, if we want these to be true stepping stones and not kind of one-off experiences. Well, I so appreciate you guys taking the time to talk to me about this today. My big takeaways are the power of an organization that's sitting between under-resourced high schools and corporate America, and that is led by young people for young people. So really great to get to know you guys, and we'll be watching all of your future initiatives to come, and hope that we can stay connected in this work.
Thank you so much.